All right, hello and welcome to Nobody Does Anything, where we ask tough questions about cardistry in order to enrich our enjoyment of this awesome, weird art form. We're your hosts. I'm Spencer. Instagram handle is at sus.deck.
I am Christopher. My username is 52 underscore squared.
I'm Stan, and my username is StanZVLV.
All right, today we're going to be talking about cardistry definitions, how we define cardistry. This is episode 0. What are we even doing? The problems with defining cardistry. All right. So let's do a little bit longer introduction because this is the first episode. So how about Stan? You start off. Just give a little short description of uh, your cardistry history.
Okay, so my cardistry history. I began doing magic and cardistry back in 2013. And back then I was like doing both magic and cardistry, but I think like 2 or 3 years ago I started to do mainly cardistry. And yeah, that's my cardistry history.
All right,
And how
dope.
would you describe your style?
Oh, my style. Well,
Yeah.
I think most of the stuff I like, or like, yeah, my style would be like mostly uh, displays. I think mostly displays and twirls and two-handed cuts.
Yeah. One
Dope.
more question. Favorite cardist?
Ooh,
Let's go.
uh, that's probably gonna be Zooey.
Nice.
Ah, good choice.
Yeah.
All right, Christopher.
All right. I also started with Magic, but I started with Magic back in like 2006. Um, and I picked up cardistry around 2012, 2013 was when I started really doing it. Um, yeah, and I've been doing it seriously for about 7 years now. Uh, and as far as my style goes, I feel like it's sort of like old school meets new school because um, I tend to, kind of bring a lot of the elements of older cardistry, but with, not that kind of. I put more thought into it, I think. Um, and my favorite cardist is D4I1.
Another good choice.
Yes.
All right.
Spencer, your turn.
I started with Magic also, but yeah, that was around 2006, 2007, back in high school because I'm old. Uh, I only did it for like a year or so, but that was the year that the Theory 11 site launched, the trilogy came out. I was watching the system and the trilogy and everything that I could on Theory 11, and then all of a sudden one day I got bored and quit. And then 6 months ago, I saw Zach on a clothing internet TV series called Round Two. Um, then I was like, holy shit, like people are still doing this. And then I just looked more into it, watched some videos, and here I am. Practice like, good 8 hours a day for 6 months. So yeah, it went deep
Yeah.
fast. I just started creating my own cuts. I I don't even know how to describe the style that I'm going for. I definitely like much more like very tight but smooth um, cardistry. I don't think a lot of what I've created has very big, like huge moments. It's more about cohesion, I feel like, throughout the entire cut. Um, yeah, 3 packets is the best. But yeah, my favorite cardist, that's really tough right now because for a long time it was Zuio as well, but currently it might be Leo Flores. I think that's my
Good
pick.
choice.
So yeah, that's us. And let's get straight into the underrated spotlight. So with this, what we wanted to do is, because there's so many cardistry pages that feature people, but you know, we all look at BCA, and a lot of underrated people that the rest of us see around, as we're not on BCA, so we're looking, so we know broader amount of people at different skill levels and who don't have many followers. We're trying to sort through those people that we've seen, that we followed randomly, or that we talked to, that we know that we think are underrated and might need and deserve a little bit more eyes on them. So today we have Eli Saunier. He's from Montreal, Canada, and this is his Instagram profile. The dude only has 121 followers, but he's super nice. You can literally message this dude and ask him like if he can shoot like a demo for you of one of his cuts, and he will shoot it for you and help teach you through it. Super nice guy. And I'm gonna play a few of his cuts. Most of it is one-handed stuff, so
Yeah, he's got a very unique one-handed style.
like this cut is so nuts. Yeah, his skirt variation cut things are just insane, and it's where I got my inspiration for my first one-handed cut. So yeah, that's Eli. Props to him, super nice guy. I suggest giving him a follow. If you find stuff that you like that he's post, message him. He's super down, and he'll be at Cardistry Con, so that's super awesome too. So if you're gonna be at Cardistry Con, find him, because I'm going to. I'll be there. I'm gonna find him.
Yeah, and also if any of you have ideas for people who should be featured, let us know. Message us on Instagram, and we'll take a look at all the submissions that come through.
Yeah,
Or
definitely.
nominations, rather. Nominations, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, that was our spotlight, and now it's to the meat and potatoes, the discussion. So let's start out with what some of y'all said on our topic of how do you define cardistry. Now, we got a decent amount just from the post we did yesterday. So let me navigate to that. All right. Wow, I have so many submissions.
Yeah, there were a lot.
Let's go with one of these.
Just pick one at random.
Yeah. Okay, this is an interesting one. So, magic.is.life_ wrote and said, "It's not a definition, but something to compare. I'd say that cardistry is like music. You can use the instrument as you wish, but what matters is the end result, how everything sounds together, and if people like it. Same for painting." So that's interesting.
So just are we gonna be like you read a couple and we talk about them after that, or we just go through them one by one?
Maybe we should. I'll read it. If y'all want to say something about it, say something about it. So how do you feel about that last one? I can give it another. Said it's not a definition, but something to compare. And then they talk about comparing it to music.
So should I?
So they said what matters in the end result is the end result, how everything sounds together, and if people like it.
It's interesting, but it's a little vague, I feel like. And I think that's one of the problems with a lot of these definitions. Um, but it's the idea of, comparing it, I think, is certainly apt. But it's just then, becomes, well, music has, at least a loose definition. And I feel like that's kind of what we're looking for. So I don't know exactly if a comparison will help with our goal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not just that. I always feel like also not just this definition, but like every definition that kind of starts comparing it to something else, it kind of takes away uh, from how people see it. I mean, like it really takes away from how you want people to see cardistry as how it is, and instead you kind of just give them a comparison, and then it kind of gets lost. The meaning kind of gets lost, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I have a really long one from username cut_open_fries. Cut open fries. So it is. Cardistry is defined as many fascinating ways to juggle, shuffle, and play around with the cards. Cardistry has evolved over the years, though. Our community is bigger than expected. Cards fascinate more people than anyone would ever think, and since the start, there hasn't been a wrong way to do cardistry. There's people and brands that we all started loving. Anyone, Dealer's Grip, Lotus in Hand, Fontaine Cards, Mono Santa, and the list goes on and on. The biggest influencers of cardistry, such as Tobias Levin, Zach Mueller, Dan and Dave, Nikolai Pedersen, and so on, have brought this community closer, and now there's CardistryCon as well as CCC, CardistryCon Championship. No one expected that shuffling cards could affect so many people in an enormous way.
That's a lot to unpack.
Yeah. But it goes so the main definition, I suppose, is the first sentence. Cardistry is defined as many fascinating ways to juggle, shuffle, and play around with cards.
I like that definition a little bit, but like it runs into the same problem that a lot of these definitions that I've seen run into, because like going by that definition, like playing a game of solitaire would be cardistry,
Yeah, this is kind of like my argument as well. Like we talked about before, and we were talking about, okay, so we watched this video and somebody makes a display that's like a very rudimentary playing card, like house, how you would build houses with playing cards as a kid or something like this, or you see it in movies and whatnot. And they do that just in a, they add some flair, and they do it with one hand or something like this, and then they put the cards back on the deck, to put it just simply. So what's the difference between that and when a little kid finds a bunch of playing cards or Pokemon cards or Yu-Gi-Oh cards, whatever, and then builds a house with them across their living room floor? I mean, you're essentially, when you break it down, it's the same exact thing. Other than one looks more fancy and has thought behind it, and the other one has thought behind it, but a different train of thought and reasoning. But it's kind of doing the same thing, right?
Yeah, well, and that's an interesting point, because if you notice, most of these definitions that we've been getting, and just most of the ways people define cards, is just by kind of describing what it is, but not what it does.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like it kind of, it removes the goal of cardistry, because I think the goal of cardistry is what makes it very unique. So it makes it more than just playing around with cards. And I mean, I guess like that is a very good objective descriptor of what we do as cardists, but it definitely falls short in terms of like a, like dictionary definition that we can look at and say that's cardistry.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good way to put it.
No, I was just about to say that. So you suggesting that there be like two different parts to the definition? One which is like describing what you do, and the other one is like what the aims are? Or how do I have to understand your... or what you
Yeah,
said.
something like that. I mean, I'm I'm kind of thinking of like how other art forms are defined, and like if you asked like an artist how to define like painting, let's say, they would describe, oh, it's it's using these mediums, it's using a brush, using paint to create something, like, and then like for the purpose of self-expression, or like um, or reflecting about life or something like that. I mean, I think definitely at least we need to be able to acknowledge the purpose of cardistry. Maybe, I mean, at least partially in the definition, because that sort of that makes the definition really grounded. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. All right. I found all the other ones. So Jason, Cardistries on Instagram, or Cardist tries to spell that easier. I'm sure a lot of people know of him who are listening. He wrote, "The issue with defining cardistry is that it has roots from many communities, like magic, XCM, and card flourishing. So the purpose and definition of the art has always been somewhat unclear due to previously being part of another art form."
That's interesting.
Yeah, so this is a good one because this happens to a lot of art forms, like take dance for instance. Even when a new generation and style of dance comes, it had to get inspiration from somewhere. So
Right.
this footwork may be from this style, and then this other footwork may be from another one, and then the way you move your hips is from this style, but the way you groove is from another one. And in the beginning of the history of these styles, nobody knows what to call it. Everybody has different words for it in different areas of the world. So, and it took time. It took decades, right, to mature. It took decades for people to agree on things. It took decades for certain people to get the history straight and document it and grab definitions and start using those and have it catch on. But I think the important part is that if you look at any style of dance that is established right now, you can clearly recognize it as its own thing. Whether it's borrowing from other areas, other dances, and other styles, it has pulled from them, expanded on them to create a whole new style from that inspiration. It didn't just take it, it wasn't a copy paste. And I feel that's exactly what Cardistry has done with card flourishing, XCM, and Magic. It's taken a lot of this inspiration and history and movements and theory, and then over the past, 15 years or so, it's been everybody just expanding and expanding and changing directions and adding new things into what we think cardistry is. Along with the old came the new, and then it's just evolving further into a whole that we're still trying to figure out. And that's why we're here right now. That's why we're talking.
Yeah.
You got something, Stan?
No, I was
Okay.
like, if Christopher wants to start, or
I mean, I agree a lot with that. I think, um, it's sort of going along the lines of dance. Well, for one thing, I think, like you mentioned before, Spencer, cardistry is like, it's so young as an art form. And so consequently, it's very hard to really categorize or define anything just because it's still in the early stages. Um,
Yeah.
and what you said about dance reminds me of like music, because like something like rock music was essentially just stolen from blues. And
Yeah.
then, metal borrows from rock, but you wouldn't say that metal sounds like blues. And so
Yeah.
it's sort of a thing where over time these genres, like at first, there was not a lot of difference between, like, let's say blues and rock, or jazz and rock or something. But
Sure.
now everything over time has become more distinct, and I feel like we're in that period of where everything is still sort of like soupy and unclear, and it's like, what is this, what are we doing, you know what I mean? Like you said, that's why we're here. But I think the best we can do right now probably is to try to define things broadly, just so we have a framework to work within. You know.
Yeah, definitely.
And also correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like what's also like still kind of differentiates it from like dancing and music is that we for XCM and calf flourishing and all this stuff, we also don't have like really a definition on what it really is. I mean, like if you ask a layman and you show him XCM stuff and you show him cardistry stuff, I'm sure he probably gonna say it's the same. Whereas a cardist maybe, because of his knowledge, um, could differentiate between both of them, but it's still like because of his experience, not because there is like certain terms which are set to define it. So that's like I feel like that's still something in order to so what Cardistry was saying is that it expanded from that, but we don't really we or rather laymen don't really know what it expanded from exactly. So if you get what I mean.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was funny that in the beginning Stan brought up that we keep comparing it to things like other art forms and it takes away from cardistry, and then we both just did it right now.
That is funny.
No, I wasn't like saying that it kind of it. I mean, like you could still compare it, but what I wanted to say is like you as soon as you give someone a comparison, they're kind of like what they're imagining. It suddenly starts to connect to the other thing you compare it to.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can still compare it so people can understand it, but I mean, it's still like we should when we try to find a definition, we should like try to come up with something that doesn't start comparing. I mean, like in terms of so in terms of talking in the theory about it, we can still like use this comparison. But I mean, like for making a definition, we should like take a distance from that.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
I also agree with that.
All right, let's go to the next comment. We'll do like two more, and then we'll go on to the next topic within this. So this one I found interesting because I hadn't thought about it before, and I'll expand on that in a second. But it is from Rick.005, RIC.005. I would define it like the performance of combining different packet movements using playing cards or similar things like squids. And the thing I didn't think about before was most definitions I see or hear or try and use myself have to do with playing cards specifically. And I never think about like trainers, squids, and portals and all of these things that exist for cardistry, but is it cardistry when you use those things? So if you look at Shivraj's Mercury, it is like those are packets.
Yeah,
those are taped together packets of cards. They're trainers. Is that cardistry? If they're not, I mean they're technically playing cards the way that he made the trainers, but still, like,
Yeah.
Is cardistry only with cards? Or can it be with any object as long as you're doing a certain thing that fits into the style and movement and whatever you want to say? Right? Like we don't even have a definition, so it's hard to say, right? I don't know.
Well, I mean, like inherently in the name cardistry, which is a portmanteau of card and artistry, it does, it stipulates like this is about cards. So I think like in that example, a good example would sort of be like let's say playing baseball, but instead of using a bat, you use like a 2x4 or like a guitar neck or something,
Yeah.
like you're still, playing the sport, abiding by the same rules, but you're just using something different to do it. So I don't know. That's a tough one because I feel like something like if you use squids or trainers or something, I feel like that's doing like it's not cardistry, but it's doing cardistry with something else, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, definitely. I like that way of thinking.
And it's also coming back to what you said. So with some of like not just I mean like not just the trainer stuff, but some of the stuff Shivrash does. Um, I feel like that's why he created the term car destroy, is to kind of I mean it's on one side it's still related to it, but it's not like exactly it. And for example, I don't know if Mercury would like completely fall into car destroy, but I feel like it's also like I mean like he types the packets together. So um, yeah, I think that's why he created this, and that's why where we can like put a line to how to define that. But yeah, I agree with what you both said.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. That's really interesting to think about taping packets together as car destroy, and if that's different from cardistry. Oh, it's becoming too much now.
Yeah. Spencer, you should read Linus's definition. 'Cause I
That
thought that
was the last one that I was gonna read. Actually, I have it up right now. I was just
Sick.
about to say our last one is from Linus, who is cm.mayonnaise on Instagram.
With one N.
Yes, with one N.
Yeah.
I spent a day with Frank Sung about a year ago, and we discussed the same topic. When I asked for Frank's opinion, he responded by saying that cardistry is moving sculpture, and that is something that's stuck with me ever since. It's the perfect way to define it.
That was such an interesting definition to me because like I I feel like this is a great example of how cardists think because like this is definitely like a cardist's definition. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like no layman would look at cardistry and say that. It's a very almost highbrow way of looking at cardistry. Um, but I think more than anything, like I don't think sculpture is necessarily the perfect word to define it, but I think this gets at what I was saying earlier about including the intent in the definition, right?
Yeah.
Because when you hear moving sculpture, like you have all these associations of what a sculpture is, like it's a molded object meant to resemble something in the world or an abstract idea or something like that. And I feel like that gets closer at the goal of cardistry. I mean, I think maybe if he had said like moving sculptures like with playing cards, I think that would be a little closer to like an ideal definition. But I thought it was just such an interesting way of phrasing it and of thinking about it too, because I think a lot of times cardists get so focused on the card part that they forget the artistry part. And when you think about it like that, that opens up a whole new bag of worms because then it becomes like, well, if cardistry is an art, then like who's to say that cardistry isn't cardistry? Or, like is it like sort of like a sibling of cardistry or is it like a sub branch of cardistry? These are like really kind of tough questions that we might get to, but I don't know, I just thought it was a really I think this is the right way to be thinking about it even if the definition isn't perfect.
Yeah, and I also feel like this is actually one of the I think that this is the first definition where which I heard of, which really puts this thing into the middle, which is like the intention of cardistry, because most of the times you only hear cardistry is the art of or is the art of card flourishing or something, and that's basically it. That's the only time that art is kind of mentioned in some way.
Yeah, so, definitely. Yeah. I think it's funny. Definitely, the emphasis is on the cards part and not the artistry, and in multiple ways in the community. Like it's all about buying them decks, get that hype shit, right? But yeah, I like it too, and like you said, it does feel and sound like a more highbrow. And I'm gonna say this word, but I don't mean it in a negative way. But it sounds pretentious. Moving sculpture sounds like something you'd see in the art museum in downtown. But I like it, and I do think it. Now that's very artistry side with no cards, no card part added into it. So yeah, definitely like a mixture of those two, and adding that in, I think could really go somewhere. But yeah, I really enjoyed that as well.
Yeah.
So we kind of hit on it before while we were talking about these comments and what some people wanted to say about it and how they define cardistry. But historical definitions of cardistry. Now, I'm not going to be able to, I don't have much references because when I was learning things off of the trilogy and Theory 11, when a few people put things on there for like, I think Dan and Dave had like a free one or two on there or something like that. I can't remember. It was so long ago. But the word cardistry didn't exist. And then I left. It became a thing, and then I came back, and now there's cardistry in the world. So back then we just called it XCM. Everything was pretty much XCM, and then what mostly I heard was like you do card flourishes when you do XCM. So that was my reference when I came back, and those weren't two separate things when I started. And when I watched the trilogy, I don't think someone can comment and correct me, but I don't remember Dan or Dave ever saying XCM, but often using the word flourish in a lot of their tutorials. Because, I mean, half the DVD is cardistry. Half the set is cardistry. One whole DVD is cardistry. So if somebody can correct me on that, because I bought it, the physical version, but I don't know where it is now. So
yeah, I think that's right, yeah. Which is interesting because card flourishing is usually associated with magic. And I mean, at that time, Dan and Dave were still largely magicians.
Yeah, a lot of those flourishes that were taught on there, if I remember correctly, there was a lot of like, they all had a purpose, or not all of them, but most of them had a purpose to be executed for magic. And it was a way to enhance the experience of card magic.
Yeah.
A lot of little tips and like everything from like flirt, these were all like things that accentuated like something that could be used in a magic routine, which I thought was now thinking about it is really interesting, because I feel like when I talk to cardists or when I watch cardistry, I feel like we're trying to separate as far as we can from magic. Not everybody, obviously, but in general, not much cardistry looks like it has anything to do with magic now, for the exception of the few Aviv and the Avivs and Knowles of the cardistry. The what's his name's, I remember his last name, Maynard in CCC in the finals.
Lars.
Yeah, Lars. Like he has a lot of that employed into his as well. So I'm gonna let you two take this section mostly for the historical definitions and what it was like, your experiences as cardistry grew and how the definitions changed through that time.
So what I would say is like you already said, people try to differentiate it from or to distance cardistry from magic, but in terms of definitions, I feel like most people still keep it in mind when trying to define it, because like I also looked into some of the definitions you find on the internet, and pretty much like 90% of them all have this all take on the part where that cardistry evolved from magic, or that this was like it started all with little subtleties you would do, like with tricks and all the stuff, which I kind of find interesting. Yeah, which I pretty much find interesting, but I feel like it didn't really change much in terms of definitions, simply because I feel like many people think about it, but they don't really. There isn't really a platform or like someone who really puts the effort, or at least until now, puts the effort into like doing a really defined definition for everybody to use.
Yeah. I was trying to search because I remember, I bet most people watching won't know this, but there was a guy named Richard Z who was a really old cardist, and he's the one who coined the word cardistry. I was looking for his definition. I found a very interesting comment by Dimitri Arleri on Reddit that, if you don't mind, I would like to read almost in its entirety because it's very relevant to what we're doing now.
Oh yeah.
So he's talking
Sure.
about, this is about like XCM versus card flourishing, or slash cardistry for the purposes of this post. So he says, since the beginning, both have coexisted, with DeVoe's followers on one side and D&D's followers on the other. While people were calling it card flourishing on one side, the others were calling it XCM. They pretty much both had the same definition, which was the non-magical artistic manipulation of playing cards. But it's true that the styles were different. More two-handed cuts for Dan and Dave, more stunts for DeVoe, super hands, hand lords, etc. The term cardistry was coined by Richard Z in about 2006, I think, because he realized that both old terms kind of sucked, and he was right. But again, cardistry had exactly the same definition as XCM or card flourishes. So we could say that card flourishing, XCM, and cardistry are exactly the same thing by definition, but the ones that were using those terms had different ideas of how the art form should look. Some of the best cardists now have a style that would have been categorized as XCM style, like Berger or Vieve, or even the new champ Edgar. So I don't think it's right to say that cardistry is the evolution of XCM. It's just a way better term to describe our art form. So there's a lot to unpack there, but I think that's very interesting, especially coming from Dimitri, who's been doing cardistry pretty much since its inception.
Right.
That is interesting. So it's
So have
basically,
fun with that.
yeah, so he's basically saying the name, the title of what's being done just evolved with the art form itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the most agreeable thing that I've heard so far, because it almost doesn't seem worth the time to try and nitpick if XCM and cardistry are different and we have to find out exactly what's different about them. And if you're doing one thing, then you're not doing cardistry or something like this. When, I mean, doing a fan and putting another fan on it, or, flipping a packet with the fan
Yeah, right.
somewhere, like,
Yeah.
we put that in modern. People still do these things in modern, like, now. And half the people watching it, like, fortunately, I did have that 1 year of Magic during when XCM and flourishing was a thing. But I think a lot of new people, they would never call it XCM themselves anyways. I think the majority of cardists today probably wouldn't say XCM. They would just say that's cardistry. So I think that's an interesting point, and I think that's how I would like to have my train of thought as well, on that same path of it just has all evolved, and it's growing up, and that's like it growing up.
Yeah. I think it's also interesting to consider, like, specifically these three definitions of cardistry, card flourishing, and XCM, because I feel like this is where intention plays a big role, because if you think about it, all of them have different intentions. For cardistry, like the actual, like the Richard Z definition is non-magical artistic manipulation. So that gives it a very, it's more of saying this is not the goal instead of this is the goal, but it gives you a good idea of what the goal is. Card flourishing is meant to accentuate a magic performance, and XCM is just literally manipulating cards in an extreme way. So in that way, they all have different intentions. So I think that's sort of what makes them different. But
Sure.
It's interesting that you brought up that most people would call XCM cardistry today, because I've kind of seen it both ways. Like, I've seen a lot of people just refer to it as cardistry, but this whole idea of XCM is sort of still sticking around.
Yeah, definitely. I just thought of something really interesting. So when we're talking about XCM, and then we have two people, Noel and Aviv, who have a very popular video XCM, which a lot of people think is going to be video of the year. So what about how, now that we're talking about it, can an XCM video be video of the year for CardistryCon? And is not that, I'm just going to put this out there. People in the public to say that Noel is the best cardist alive. But if we look at if we're defining cardistry and XCM and they're different, then he's not the best cardist alive. He's the best XCMer alive, right? Something like this. Like,
something DeVoe would disagree with. But.
Yeah, definitely. But these are not like, I just want to remind everyone, because I didn't do a little disclaimer in the beginning, but I want to remind everybody that we're just trying to talk about things to start conversations for everybody else to talk about. We didn't start a podcast because we think we're the authorities of cardistry or anything. The goal is to get people having discussions about it, so we as a community can like conquer the goals and the topics of the episode. So what is defined cardistry? What's the difference between cardistry, XCM, and card flourishing? Like, 3 people can't do it alone. The whole community has to start talking about this and make it something important. So take the conversation and DM one of your friends and start talking about it. And then start sharing about it and talking with more people about it. But yeah, anyways, I digress. But I forgot to say that in the beginning. But yeah, so that's another way to look at it. We have people doing, Noel is like 99.9% XCM from the videos I see him doing. If we're going to still use that term, which, like Christopher said, we're still using that term. I still hear it often.
Yeah. But is XCM the video actually XCM?
That's true. That's a good point. So this is getting really meta.
Can I make it a bit more meta for a second?
Yeah, of course.
I had a really interesting idea. So like this whole time, let's imagine that we're shifting the focus of the definition, right? This whole time we've sort of been using cardistry as like an umbrella term to like, do like, card flourishing, XCM, fan stuff, spread stuff, packet stuff, whatever. But is it possible that instead of cardistry being the umbrella term, it's just another term down here, and so we need a bigger term to encapsulate all of those definitions? Sort of like how blues, rock, jazz, whatever is all music.
Sure.
But we're saying that like, rock is the definition and everything else falls under that, or like blues is the definition and everything falls under that. But is it possible that like just we need a better name for just the general category of playing with cards, and then cardistry would fall under that, or like doing things with cards, I suppose.
That's really interesting.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
That is interesting. So that makes me think of dance again and the structure of styles. So for people who don't know, I've been doing popping for almost a decade now. But it's really interesting that Christopher brings that up. So if we set it out and we had XCM, card flourishing, and cardistry right next to each other, and then above it we had cardistry as the umbrella term as well, this is what we have in popping. So popping is the dance style. It's the main umbrella term. That's the style. But there is a style of popping called popping. And then there's like, 50 other styles. Robotics, animation, animatronics, waving. There's tons of them. But popping is a style within popping. So it's a little bit confusing, but it just happened to be the best term and the one that people used the most to describe everything as a whole over history, and it naturally became that. So I'm wondering, and it feels like exactly what's happening in cardistry. Like, we call everything cardistry, and then sometimes the same person will say, oh yeah, that's a XCM move, ha ha ha. But before they called it cardistry. So I just wanted to point out that I don't necessarily think that we have to make a new name for it, and it could literally just be, it's all cardistry, but this specific cardistry is XCM, but there's also cardistry that's just cardistry. So it gets confusing, but something like this works when the art form has, developed over decades and people have refined those separate sub styles that we're talking about. So I feel like if we keep talking about it, we keep discussing it as a community for the years to come, along with that discussion and how we talk about cardistry that we see with people, that's going to define the structure of style and how we look at cardistry, and we'll be able to say one day, the art form is this, and here are what people do in that art form that's under it. And I would think that this could happen almost naturally, but it would be nice to speed it up a little bit. Be with having discussions as a community, have discussions with your friends and talk about it, and maybe make decisions on how you talk about these things, and actively think about when you're talking about these things, why did you call it a certain name? Try and think about those things and then talk about it with somebody. Okay. So we got some good history, some stuff I didn't know. Christopher brought some heat, some fire with the history lesson, and he knows a lot more than that. He's taught me a lot. So we've covered this
forever.
Yeah. So we talked about the next topic. It's kind of like flowing through all of what we've gone through so far, but it's problems with these definitions. And that's kind of what we're flowing into naturally almost. Is like, this is getting so meta. It's getting confusing because we don't know what to do. We're not there yet. And I think that's okay. But do you guys have any other like blatant problems or issues, maybe with even having definitions, or with how we're defining these things, or I don't know. If we want to expand on things that we talked about previously already.
So you mean like if we have like other terms we would like to, or other stuff we would like to discuss in this, in terms of this topic? Ooh.
Yeah, so problem with definitions in cardistry. Like we could, like I said, we were naturally flowing into it, so we could literally expand upon, is XCM a video that has XCM in it? I think that's really interesting because I never thought about that. To be honest, when I saw it, I thought they were just making a joke and calling it XCM, and I always thought it's a cardistry video that's called XCM. That's funny because nobody does XCM. But maybe everybody does XCM, and maybe that's what they're getting at. Who knows? I don't know, but I thought that's kind of what went through my head when I saw that video.
But I think like I don't know, but this would kind of imply that XCM is that, but which is, I think it's not, because I mean like there's still people doing XCM moves or creating XCM moves, in my opinion. It's just, I mean, like if you look at, Lucas Rebel on Instagram, would you say he's doing, because I think like so I'm not 100% sure about that, but I think like he himself sees it kinda that he's kind of doing XCM stuff. But would you guys say that? I mean, like, but then we're back to where we say it's not like extinct. It's still here with us. So it's not like, it's not that people still do it. And damn, now I forget what. No, now I forget what the point. So what you were? Sorry, Spencer. What did you say again?
I was just talking about like how confusing it is, like when you watch a video like XCM. Are they making just a cool reference to the past, but they don't explicitly say like we are doing XCM or this is a video of cardistry, you know? So it's kind of up for interpretation. And I think you bring up an interesting point. I didn't think about Lucas right off the bat, because you don't see a lot of what he does. You don't see a lot of like, 3-packet, 4-packet, 5-packet cuts and, the standard looking displays and things like this that most people are doing. And it does, now that you brought it up, it's like, oh yeah, this does feel like XCM when I watch it. I mean, XCM, Christopher referenced it earlier, but it literally stands for extreme card manipulation. And if that's not what Lucas is doing, I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah, but then again, we fall into this thing where we have to kind of say if XCM is really something of its own or if it's just like like some other sort of genre.
Yeah,
you would kind of see, you know what I mean?
yeah. I for me personally, I look at it how Christopher put it, was like, so if we substitute cardistry for music just to make it easier to understand, you have rock at the top, and then XCM is like hard rock, and cardistry is like soft rock, and then you have card flourishes, which are like alternative rock. So that's kind of how I see it for myself, because I feel like I just love how Dimitri put it so much, and it makes so much sense that I almost want to say that XCM is dead, but it didn't die. It grew up and became cardistry. So that's kind of how I'd like to see it. But if it's more comfortable for people, then it also makes sense to make it a subgenre of cardistry, but it's still cardistry at the end of the day. So you wouldn't be wrong saying like, oh, that XCM video is great cardistry, and you wouldn't be wrong saying that XCM video is great XCM, because XCM would be under the umbrella of cardistry. But it's just, if we want to say that XCM isn't cardistry or that XCM matured and grew up into cardistry, then eventually that language has to die, right? Then XCM is language that we don't need in the vocabulary, other than when we're talking about references to the history and about history and the past, to describe, to educate and inform and learn about the history of cardistry. But otherwise, it wouldn't make sense for us to use it at all if it's growing up and growing out of that stage into something bigger and better that also includes that XCM itself.
Well, you heard it first here, folks. XCM is dead. This brings up something interesting that I've thought a lot about in regards to a lot of topics, and especially, the way we use language, because like, especially in terms of definitions, you can talk about prescriptive versus descriptive definitions, where for anyone who doesn't, is not familiar with those words, and I don't blame you, a prescriptive definition would be sort of, imagine like, 3 guys sitting in a podcast telling you what a definition is, so we'd be prescribing a way to think about it, and we would be saying that like, this is what it is based on whatever we think or whatever factors, whereas the descriptive definition is literally just analyze, like seeing what people do and just putting that into words. And what I think is interesting is that there's a natural inclination to be very descriptive when it comes, especially when it comes to art, because I mean, obviously art is governed by the people who do it. The way people do it is going to inform the definition, but at the same time, if it completely lacks any degree of prescriptivism, then we're going to end up with an art that has no definition, because it will always change as styles change. You know what I mean? So like, if cardistry changed, like let's say, cardistry could, for all we know, it could be the XCM of today, and in like 10 years, it'll be obsolete. We'll use a new term. It will keep having this rotating door of terminology to use. And I don't think that creates a good foundation, especially for such a young art form. So I feel like we do need a degree of prescriptive definition in the art form. The question is how much, and when you were talking about the whole music thing, I think that's an apt comparison, not to, again, to compare it, but I think at least the way that it's categorized is similar, because when you think about it, cardistry is a performance art. I feel like a lot of people forget that it's a performance art. Sure, we do it through videos only, but I mean, like, you can record an album in your bedroom, it's sort of the same thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like what genres are to music is like what styles are to cardistry. So it's almost like the different styles of cardistry give us different definitions and different categorizations to talk about. Because, for instance, like, packet cutting has become a very real style in the past few years. Like, you'll see lots of people who do nothing but packet-based cardistry. And of course, that's not the only kind of cardistry, but it is a way that people are doing it. So we can kind of use that to descriptively say, well, a lot of people are only using, cuts with entire packets in it, no single cards, no fans or whatever. And that's sort of one sub definition we can use under that. So in a way, I guess what I'm saying is, like, we almost need more definitions to help us get a better picture of what it is we're doing by, like, looking at the details and using those details to sort of inform the broader definition of what cardistry or whatever card flourishing is.
Yeah, that's so what I get from that is you're basically, so we took, like, for example, let's have cardistry at the top, and then we'll have XCM, cardistry, and card flourishing, and then we're adding under cardistry packet cuts, structural displays or something like this, and whatever else we want. Then in XCM we would have different foundational styles of what it means to do XCM, and in card flourishing, I don't know what you would have: flirt, bullet, these things maybe.
Fans.
Fans, thumb fan, whatever, lapel spread, things like
and
this.
Of course, there's going to be a lot of crossover, but that's sort of the point, But it's at the same time, it's not like we're not saying that, like, for instance, like putting like a fan under the card flourishing label doesn't mean that it's not XCM or not cardistry, but it's just like it's almost like there's going to be stuff that's unique to each kind of specific art form, but then there's going to be a lot of shared stuff as well, which that makes it really tricky to define because it shares so much,
Yeah, but I also think, like, this is the majority of art forms and how they work and how they're structured. Is like there's no styles in music or dance or whatever that I can think of that don't share something with another style. I don't think that exists. I don't think it's possible for it to exist in 2019 because there's too much information. There's too much stuff. I don't mean too much. There's a lot of information, and there's a lot of things being created in all of art where it's impossible for us as humans to not take in information and be inspired by it, even subconsciously or consciously. So I think that's a good thing, and I think it can be achieved. And I don't think it'll be too hard. I just think it's going to take time for the community to grow into those definitions and start actually defining them so people can start laying out a structure and we can get that moving forward so we can build upon it. But also going back to what you said, it's like, how much structure are we trying to build? Because the thing that I find most fascinating and beautiful about cardistry is how subjective and how open it is in creation. Like, I feel like if you add too much structure without everybody in the community knowing that it's extremely flexible still, we just needed a way just to define it, it's going to hinder creativity. And if people don't want to be associated with doing XCM, they don't want to be called an XCM artist or something. They want to be called a cardist, and I do cardistry only. Like, that may hinder so much of their creativity and how they create. But it can also create new things as well. forcing somebody to take out things. So it's just getting more complex, basically, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
No, definitely, man. Also, so referring to what you kind of said earlier is like that it's in performance art.
Right.
What also came into my mind is, shouldn't we then also kind of integrate the fact that we can, or we mostly do it on camera together with editing and music? Shouldn't that be the also part of the definition too then? Because like we see it as a performance art, and I think like that's also part of the performance we're giving with Cardistry.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
that's something that I've thought a lot about, because this is probably a hot take, and we can expand on this in a future episode, but I don't think that cardistry I don't think it can be effectively performed to lay people. Like, I don't think it's a performance art in the same way music is, you know what I mean? At least not at this stage. And, all things aside, like, unless you live in like California or Singapore or like Denmark, you're pretty not isolated, but I mean, it'll be really rare to connect with cardists regularly in person if you're not like in a hot spot.
Yeah.
And even if you do, like, you have a community of maybe like 5 people or something like that you regularly jam with. So the online community and the way that we communicate through video is very important. I mean, and that's why the community just moved entirely almost over to Instagram. I mean, it's like 95% Instagram, 5% YouTube now. But Stan, I definitely agree with you that it should be part of it, because that's how we communicate our art. We're not doing it for each other in person, at least as the performance. And I think that also plays into the intention of what cardistry is, sharing it online. So I definitely think that it should be part of that definition, which, and this is something I know Spencer would agree with, that means that being a cardist doesn't just mean knowing how to do cardistry, it means how to create good video.
Yeah. And and to further expand on that, it also means knowing how to understand what you're looking at when you're looking at video.
Mm-hmm.
For my credentials, I have a degree in video production, so it's been interesting reading comments and hearing what people have to say when they watch a video and they comment on the production value and what they think is good and what is actually good in like the video production world and what professionals would say is good. There's a big difference and there's a large disconnect, and I think that's something that's extremely important that needs to be addressed. And kind of like, I mean, on these cardistry beginner pages things or whatever, there could be a list of like introduction to videography and editing videos that are just quick overviews of rules of video. They're broken all the time in cardistry videos, and they bug the hell out of me. It's so hard for me to watch, and once you learn it, it's hard not to notice them. And I think that's important because, like they were saying, this is a 99% video based art, which I think is great.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's amazing because that's the only reason it was allowed to grow this large. That's the only reason we're allowed to do this right now. It's because this is an online community majority. CardistryCon only happens once a year, so that's like the only time cardistry is legitimately being performed on a big scale live, I feel like.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think notably it's not a performance art in the way that, like, you wouldn't go out to see a cardistry performance. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that's ever going to be a thing for various reasons. And we might hit that in a different episode, who knows? But yeah, and it's almost like, being a musician, but not learning how to, like, being a musician, wanting to share your stuff and not learning to record your own music,
Yeah, definitely.
Like, and with cardistry, you don't have the advantage of just going down to like your local open mic night or whatever. I mean, I guess you could, but I wouldn't suggest doing cardistry at an open mic. But it's that similar sort of things. Like, if you want to take the steps to share your stuff, you have to learn the ways to do it, to get the best out of it, to represent your art form in the best possible way.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Hold on, I have
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Stan.
Oh yeah, no, I just wanted to add on a side note that what I found, so where this really comes into play, that you can, so from a layman's perspective, you can do a really good cardistry video if you're good at editing, although your cardistry is bad. And I mean,
Yeah.
if you compare it to someone who has good cardistry, but whose video quality is bad, it instantly affects how laymen see it, and that's what I really find interesting. So there you really can see how much impact it has.
I feel like that even affects how Cardis see it. I mean, look at the CCC and Yang's videos that are professionally, like, well produced. That's a lot of hours in After Effects. It made my head hurt thinking about all the work that was put into that. And then you look at Gowlock's videos, which were terrible. Just terrible quality, bad cuts, bad editing altogether. Just talking about the video. I have nothing else to say.
Save it for the next episode. Wink, wink.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying not to bring it up because next episode is going to be a banger. It's going to be a lot of hot takes. I will say that. I feel like. Oh, God. Yeah, it's going to be nuts. But actually, we are at an hour and 15 minutes. So I think we should wrap this up. Our first episode, episode 0, introductory. I really hope. I mean, it's so hard because we've had nights where we will sit on Tiny Chat and talk about this for 4 or 5 hours straight. Just one of these, just this topic, or any of the topics that we're gonna have for one of these. So I think it's gonna be a little rough for us to stick to time limits, but we're trying to aim for an hour, and we're gonna see what all of you say. If you're like itching to have something that you can listen to at work with headphones on or something that's 2 hours long, maybe once a month we have a 2-hour special or something like this. You give us suggestions, hit us up in the DMs. We're very open. Right now I'm the main person running the Instagram, and it's extremely overwhelming right now in a good way. Like, woke up to like 20 messages from y'all, like sharing the post and stories, and it's amazing. The support is nuts. We only started that Instagram page, like, it just sat dead until last night. It's been 12 hours, and it's insane. So I want to thank everybody for that. That's amazing. We're not
68 followers.
Yeah, that's insane. When we started recording this podcast, it was like 120. So just in that time, it's gone up.
And the thing is, like, I think that says a lot about what you guys want to see, because, like, none of us are like, we're no Tobias. You know what I mean? Like, we're just three guys who like cardistry. But it means a lot that even though we don't have the most clout, which, again, sneak peek at a future episode.
Another episode.
Even though we don't have the most clout, I think it means a lot that you want to listen to this content, and we, like Spencer said, we want to hear what kind of content you want, what kind of stuff you want to talk about, and we're always happy to chat and comments or DMs or whatever, and we welcome your suggestions.
Yeah, I do just want to throw out there is because of this initial like big bang of growth right in the beginning, that replies may take a little bit longer because there is a lot to manage. And for my actual job in real life, I manage 2 other Instagram pages full time. My own Instagram page, which, as a lot of people know, I keep curated and try and keep up on, and now this one. So please be patient with replies. Usually I'll try and go in and at least like what you said to let you know, to acknowledge that I read it. It's been taken into thought. I might not actually be able to write a reply to everything, but I will try and go in and at least like what is said to let you know that, hey, I hear you, I see you. And we keep a Google Doc that we're all a part of, and we keep our ideas and write down suggestions from everybody, and then we talk about them, break them down, and go on from there. So please do share your constructive criticisms, things you'd like to hear, ideas for segments and sections within the show that you think would be good. And don't forget, if you have people that you know that might be deserving of the undeserved spotlight, shoot us their Instagram as well. And we'd be more than happy. We're excited to look at things like that. So
Yeah.
with that, I do want to close because we are now at an hour and 20 minutes. So we're 20 minutes over. Yeah.
Okay, first of all, I want to just say for upcoming episodes, we have some really exciting guest spots planned. We're going to have some really cool artists come on and talk about stuff, and trust me, you will not want to miss those episodes. Second of all, do we want to bring up the whole mechanic workshop thing and kind of gauge interest on that, or move workshop?
Here's what I'm going to say about it. On the next NDA post, that's going to be the question on the caption. And
Alright.
Feel free to reply in DMs or in the comments. I prefer comments so other people can read ideas and build their ideas and opinions off of that. And so everybody can collaborate on working on what you want as a community. So leave what you want, what you think about it. I'll get that post up with the question today at some point, which is the day before this releases. So we'll have an answer. We'll have a good view of it by the time this releases to everybody.
Sick.
And
Alright.
what do you guys think about releasing who we have as guests? Should we tell them, or should we keep it under wraps for a little bit longer?
I think a little bit longer.
Okay. Yeah, I think y'all, like Christopher said, y'all are going to be excited for this. We might be 3 people that nobody really knows, but our guests are definitely, our guests.
There's
The
some
majority of people
artists. Yeah.
going to know him, for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited. All right, with that, I do want to say again, thank you. We really appreciate the support and how much support there's been, how quickly it's been, how much everybody has been sharing it so other people can see it. This is our first ever podcast that all of us have done, so please be patient while we work out the kinks. We're really going to strive and work hard to bring you the best content that we can and make it available on the most outlets that we can. This will be on YouTube and SoundCloud immediately for every episode. I'm going to be working on trying to get it on things like Spotify and Apple Music as well, because most of us use that anyways. So I want to make it as easy as possible to access for everybody, because it's important that more people hear this and then have conversations like we said. So with that, I want to say thank you for listening again. My name is Spencer at sus.deck, and y'all can say your closing as well.
Christopher at 52_squared. Thank you all for watching, and I'm very excited to do future episodes. And like Spencer said, let us know what you want to see, and we will deliver.
Yeah, and I'm Stan, username StanZVLV, and I'm also really hyped too for future episodes. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you. And this was NDA Nobody Does Anything. And we out. I think that went pretty well.